While watching the Netflix interview with Jay-Z and David Letterman, although I enjoy the interview because David Letterman is a natural conversationalist and Jay-Z is the person that he is and he's able to share the insight that he can provide, in the middle of that interview, what I found myself craving was Jay-Z having this comfortable sit down with somebody who is actually within the hip-hop community. As great and as decorated a hip-hop journalist as Elliot Wilson is, he's Jay-Z's employee. So when he interviews Jay-Z and he just serves up fluff questions that Jay-Z can just hit out of the park and seem like this great guy, it's not what you really want. You see him having these pristine interviews on CNN with Van Jones and New York Times interviews where they sit down and it's as if they're talking to a man who's just totally done and has transcended what rap music is, and which is all very true, but that's all you really get. You either get that very pristine interview or you get the interview by the employee. So you don't really get other sides of Jay-Z other than the great parts. So he's not forced to give you any insight as far as anything else. Because remember one thing. Remember when he made the song about auto-tuning and how he was sick of it? That was still Jay-Z being in the culture and breathing the culture. And whether you want to say that these were political tactics, auto-tune was something that he wasn't providing himself, so he wanted to shit on a trend that would drown out his own music. Whatever case you want to make for his reasoning behind that song, you have to appreciate that he was still knee-deep in this. So now we resort to having interviews where Jay-Z is pretty much treated like the ambassador of the word nigga. When David Letterman uncomfortably brings up, well, I shouldn't really talk about this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, and you're going to think I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it already. I'm sick of everybody having their stupid opinions on who can use a word and who can't. Let's talk about something else. Let's go somewhere else with Jay-Z. Sometimes interviews with Jay sort of feel like an episode of The Kids Say the Darndest Things. That was an old show that was hosted by Bill Cosby. I'm not sure if somebody hosted it before that, but Bill Cosby hosted this show where he would talk to children and children would just awkwardly answer questions, and anything they said was applauded by the audience, So I've seen so many interviews with Jay-Z where he's on like Jimmy Fallon or any of these late night shows with Jimmy Kimmel, and he answers questions sort of kind of answering questions, but being very cryptic about everything and just, monosyllable answers like, yeah. He nervously looks around and he goes, well, sometimes, like it's this all cute shit, which is cool because it's sort of the Hollywood answers to everything, and the whole crowd laughs because it's like, oh my God, here's this former drug dealer turned millionaire. This is great. But that's not the only side to Jay-Z. Now, I'm not expecting Jay-Z to have interviews with Charlamagne the God. I think the last time he was on The Breakfast Club was probably maybe 5 years ago, but it's at least giving you more of Jay-Z. And if he's willing to do interviews, why not do interviews with people who actually live and breathe the culture instead of constantly doing these things that pander to white audiences where you infantilize Meek Mill. And I don't understand all the moving parts to Meek Mill's probation situation, but just the way he described it, it's like, oh, he had this friend and his friend, like, it's just like he's not talking real. He's just talking to an audience of just white liberals who just, they're going to eat up everything that he has to say. They're going to eat up everything that he has to say. And of course, he addresses the things that are most prevalent to in the eyes of white liberal people. I mean, let's talk about your mother being gay. Let's talk about white privilege. Let's talk about, because guilty whites, obviously, they want to talk about that. And I want to make a comment about that, too, because there was a Fox video. And by the way, you are listening to the Ddotpodcast. If you would like to donate to the Ddotpodcast, you can always hit me up on PayPal at ddotpodcast@gmail.com. Your donations have been very appreciated. Please continue to do so, because don't forget, and we'll get back to the Jay-Z thing in a second, because don't forget that you donating to the show, if you want this thing on iTunes, there's a server cost that I have to pay. You know, there's a fee that I have to pay in order to keep it on iTunes. So those of you who I'm sure have iPhones, I can put the podcast on iTunes. But in order to do that more comfortably, your donations will be needed. But anyway, so I want to mention the feature, or not the feature, the spot on Fox News where they discussed Jay-Z's interview with David Letterman, and they highlighted the comment that he made about white privilege. And they brought on this guy. I'm not sure what his name is. They, of course, as Fox News will always do, they will always placate one black person against another, a black person who will then come in and then just by default, just because they're on the screen disagreeing with Jay-Z, that somehow means that all black people feel this way. You know, all black people are opposing Jay-Z, and Jay-Z is being very divisive. I hate how Fox News does that. I hate how Fox News presents black people as tokens, and these people always say things like, oh, the person of color who mentions white privilege, how could they say this when they're a billionaire? But at the same time, it never really addresses and takes seriously what Jay-Z is trying to say. So they're shooting the messenger, but they're not paying attention to the message at all. You know, as if Jay-Z being a billionaire somehow makes his point invalid because he doesn't live that lifestyle. Forgetting all along that the reason why he's saying this is because he has a platform, and now you're talking about it on Fox News. And that's the reason why he says it. He doesn't say it because he is living the struggle or because he doesn't have any privilege himself. He's saying that this is something that exists. But anyway, as I said, the interview was missing a lot to me because of that. You know, this is coming from the perspective of somebody who has been a Jay-Z fan for many, many years. So maybe you could say that I've heard too many Jay-Z interviews and I'm looking for something more in depth and something. And I don't look at Jay-Z as a beacon of thought, really. I mean, you can go across YouTube and you can find a lot of quotes on success from Jay-Z, and I'm sure he has a lot of gems to offer. But overall, when Jay-Z's unraveling his ideas, I'm not really all that intrigued, but he can provide some knowledge. And that's not really going to be provided if he's being interviewed by David Letterman. With exception to the end of the discussion where they're just talking about something that's just human, you know? And again, this sort of intimacy and this trust is just something that I wish I would see Jay-Z do with someone. I mean, he wouldn't be able to do this with Torre. He wouldn't be able to do this with Sway. You understand? He has to do this. Maybe I just have a problem with the fact that he's doing it with somebody who's not connected to hip hop whatsoever. It's not the fact that David Letterman's white. That doesn't matter to me. It's the fact that he's doing it with somebody who's not aware of anything, so they can't push Jay-Z on anything. They can't make the interview. They're unable to make the interview something that contains all dimensions of a great conversation, because it's going to highlight how much of a great person you are. It's going to highlight your past. But if an interview is not going to include a bit of pushback, a bit of, hey, you said this, but let me challenge you for a second here, because you're not a child. Okay. I as a journalist, or I as a broadcaster, whatever David Letterman would consider himself to be, I have a responsibility to the people to push you a little and to see what you have to say about this. Not being salacious, not saying something that's, something that Wendy Williams would say in the middle of an interview that's just totally out of. By the way, there's an old interview by Wendy Williams where she's interviewing Judge Mathis, and it is the greatest piece of audio that you will ever hear. Please go on YouTube after you listen to this podcast. Go on YouTube and look up Judge Mathis and Wendy Williams, and you will hear an interview where Wendy Williams is just bringing up Judge Mathis's past as a coke addict or something. I forget. No, that's what Judge Mathis retorts with. Wendy's bringing up something about his past, maybe marital infidelities, and then Judge Mathis brings out her coke habits and how she's sort of fidgety at the moment, so she may be on coke right now, and Wendy gets flustered and she gets uncomfortable, and Judge Mathis shows you that he could not be fucked with. It's a very, very, very good argument if you guys want to hear one. So I did enjoy the last bit of the interview where they talked about him cheating on Beyoncé, and then they got into more of a grown man conversation, something that transcends music, something that transcends politics, and it's just more human especially when Jay-Z was talking about the work. You know, when he was talking about cheating on Beyoncé, he said, we've had to do so much work to get here. And I totally understand what he's trying to say with that, because the amount of work that goes into building a relationship is something that's it's overlooked, because I think so much of what we see these days is the reward. We see so much of the reward. We see so much of relationship goals. We see that plastered all over our timelines, and people present the beautiful parts of their life. People don't show you pictures of an argument that they just had. They don't show you, they don't show you a video of them arguing with somebody and just shaking their head at the camera and saying, this motherfucker won't shut up. We've been arguing for the last 4 hours. Or not that the work has to be something that's so brutal and so aggressive, but sometimes it can get to that. So much of our lives is just this one-sided pie in the sky vision that you tend to forget that. And here's one thing that I really realized when it came to online dating. I love how I just completely take a total detour. When I was really heavy on online dating, I sort of had this thing that I would always say, because I know that every female that I met would totally agree, because it's absolutely true and it's undeniable. I think the biggest problem with online dating is that men have so many options today. The rabbit's got the gun. If you think about a woman in 1995 who was a 4, she's basically physically a 4. The amount of attention that she got in that year is the amount of attention that any man can get now, or potentially. And keep in mind, especially here in New York City, if a woman is a 4 and she's walking down the street, there is a high chance that if she's walking around the right block, people are going to catcall the shit out of her, because that's just the nature of the city. Everybody walks, everybody's all over the place, so people have nothing to do. They stand on corners and they say stupid shit. So what I'm trying to say is that somebody who is not that attractive, or a woman who wasn't that attractive back in the 90s, now had the options at that time to basically sleep with any man that they wanted. And now any man in his very hands has those very same options available to him. Now, with that comes a lot of responsibility, because it is a great power. Now, with that, a man can meet you on a date, and if he doesn't like 3 or 4 things about you, he's on to the next one. Oh, you check several boxes of requirements that I had, but you're missing this. On to the next one. So in that, what you lose is the work that Jay-Z was referencing. In that, you lose that you're going to struggle with someone. Your job is to pick who you're going to struggle with. And what I mean struggle is you're going to have a back and forth. You're going to have a push and pull. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have lies. You're going to have things that are going to be exposed. You're going to have vulnerabilities. And when you meet someone, you should hope that you see those negative aspects about them. Because if you meet someone and they are absolutely perfect and infallible and you can't find a single thing wrong about them, don't you just love how I just fucking just bullshit, infallible, and you can't find anything it's a base. I'm explaining the word that I said. You see, I'm stalling here. If you can't find anything around that person, then that's a red flag. So putting in that work is very important. And that's something that came towards the end of the interview that I definitely agree with and pretty much wrapped it up well. Because don't forget, David Letterman is David Letterman, so he's going to make somebody feel that comfortable. And in fact, that's probably the main reason why I'm so bothered, or not really bothered, or just really wanted to see another format, because I see Jay-Z in that setting and divulging all that information. I just like to see it in a different context with a different crowd for a different demographic. Okay, so let me move on to my next subject. I would like to talk about something that I saw last night, which was, well, not last night, I saw it this morning, which is very interesting to me. I saw DJ Akademiks and Domislive argue they argued for about 4 hours. I haven't gotten to the whole thing, but I basically get the gist of it by watching just a little bit of the live stream. And first of all, what I'm going to say is that was a pretty good podcast. You know, that was a very entertaining podcast. You know, when you got past all of the bloviating, when you got past all of the posturing and them sort of just, just arguing with each other about petty stuff, when they were hashing out details and trying to find screenshots and everything, I was actually intrigued. I was actually interested in this, and I was looking at this and saying, well, they have about a 5 to 10 minute span every now and then where they're being quite cordial and quite polite and accommodating to each other. And I think within those pockets pretty much proves that if they did a show together, I think it would be pretty interesting. But that's just me, because I just love podcasts and whatever. But I'm not going to get into the details of everything that they were arguing about, but from what I can tell, it's just like everything else. I mean, if you argue with somebody for a long period of time, then it's basically like a knot, and that knot is going to loosen up time and time into that argument, and eventually both of you are going to seem like you've been exposed about something. We could say that Dom was correct about what he said about Tekashi and how Tekashi said it live on the podcast that Akademiks was on, that he had his reference, somebody was writing his reference track, or he was listening to his reference track, and Akademiks pretty much just glossed over it. To Dom's point, that's not honest. That's not journalism. That's you withholding something because you have ties to this artist. This is an obvious point that I've made. It's an obvious point that anyone can see. If you're very close to someone, then by the very nature of your relationship, because you and him have the same connections, oh, he's the guy that I met, the reference tracks through him, and we record in the same studio, all of that explains what you're being pressed about. All of it explains is that you have a personal relationship, and it's different. It's complicated. So that's the very reason why Dom is saying what he's saying. And on the other hand, you could say that Akademiks is right about managing Selena or not managing. Look, I'm talking about these people and I have no fucking clue who this girl is. But from what I could hear on the podcast, Dom said that Akademiks managed this person and then it was determined that he really didn't. And Akademiks had an issue with the fact that Dom said, you stated that I did. That is pure conjecture and it's not valid for you to say that. That's fake news. So they're both right on some things, as far as, taking points for this and that. I think that's a complete waste of time. But we have to remember that this is a new form of media, and these are the new voices that are clashing. And the important thing that we remember here and that we don't forget is that they're fighting over things that aren't very meaningful. They're fighting over things that aren't very meaningful. And the only thing that I can say is that just don't get lost in the details of all the things that they're arguing about, because at the end of the day, it's entertainment news, it's tabloids. That's all it really is. So don't get too emotional over it. It's just two people talking about work. No one says, hey, when you come to this city, I'm going to do this and that to you. They're just two people having a disagreement about something. And I'm all for it because it was pretty entertaining. And I would really like to hear a podcast between the both of them. Like if you did a podcast between them and it was like Dom versus Akademiks, and that's sort of the concept, is that we're going to argue about things. And it would probably be a better everyday struggle because it's deeply rooted. It's deeply rooted in something else, you know? And also by listening to that, I got there's this little dirty thing that commentators don't really talk about. And that's other commentators. Commentators, look, I've always mentioned people in media, period. I've always mentioned DJ Vlad. I've mentioned World Star Hip Hop. I've mentioned Charlemagne the God. I've mentioned Star. I've mentioned Ebro. I've talked about these people for years. And it doesn't matter if somebody arises from YouTube. That doesn't all of a sudden change, you know? Commentators on YouTube sort of had this thing where we have to keep blinders on and we enjoy talking about everything else, but it's as if we don't believe in the actual nature of what we do. We don't believe in the nature of discussion. We don't believe in the nature of talking. This is what we do. We talk about things, we discuss things, and all of a sudden when it relates or seems too close to what it is that we do, we like to play the, oh, I don't really know who that person is, or I wasn't aware that. We're aware of everything else. We're aware of everything else, but we're not aware of any of those things. And I would just like to say that stop it, because commentary is interesting. Arguments between two commentators is interesting. What we do is interesting. It's not more interesting than the music. It's not more interesting than the industry when interesting things actually happen. But it's fun. It's fun to discuss. It's fun to take facts and say, well, this was incorrect what you said. This was right. Well, give me the screenshot to this and let me do this. It's like we're fact checking. You know, you really get the sense that people care about the details of what they do. You know, they care about the details and getting things right. And this is why I told you guys last week. This is why I told you guys last week when I was discussing the reaction channels. Get good at something. Get good at something. Be a practitioner at what you do. You know, don't just go out there and say things, because eventually you will be pressed for saying these things, and we're going to fact check and we're going to find out if what you indeed had to say was factual or whatever the fuck it was. You know what I'm saying? So I enjoyed that aspect of it. And let's just stop pretending like commentary isn't interesting. You know, there's a reason why DJ Akademiks is more popular than a lot of these SoundCloud rappers. It's because what he's doing online is more interesting than the actual subjects that he's talking about. Of course, it's a train wreck. It's just terrible reporting, you know, of things that perpetuate a negative energy with, you know, which is black people in general. You know, so it makes our, you know, it makes our racial self-esteem lower because we always go at each other. I noticed at the beginning of the whole thing, Akademiks mentions, hey man, I spoke to Adam 22, and I spoke to Cole Bennett. And I'm listening to this and like, okay, is he going to mention any black YouTubers? Because if he doesn't, this is yet again just another thing that just happens on YouTube always. That always happens on YouTube. It happened on YouTube with the comedy community. It happened on YouTube several years ago when you had a feud between two huge comedy YouTubers, and that was Kane Carter and Spoken Reasons. And they sort of had this thing where they were clashing against each other, and it's because there's always a scarcity mind when it comes to black people. When it comes to people of color, we always feel that if we see somebody across the aisle from us that looks like us, we always feel like this world is dominated by whites. It's dominated by whites. So I don't mind Cole Bennett. I don't mind Adam 22, because they're always going to be there. You see how the sort of the remnants of this supremacy sort of just still lives within people's minds, because it's true. This is some real shit. It's like I have no problem with these two people, but now I have a problem with you. I have an issue with you. And I think one of the main things that arises from that is just, it's a scarcity mindset. It's a scarcity mindset. It's, you're the guy, you talk about YouTube. I mean, you talk about rap on YouTube and you're black. And I feel that in some way is going to take some attention or take something away from me. But these guys know they're fine. Let's dice up whatever it is that they do. Oh, no, he does interviews. Oh, he does videos. All of a sudden, there's a lot of thought. There's a lot of compartmentalization to what they do. But there's no compartmentalization when it comes to someone who looks like you. So this is something that we need to stop. This is something that we just need to let go of. And it's okay to discuss each other. We're not heart surgeons. We're not saving the world. We're not ridding the world of any terrible doing. We're just talking and sharing our thoughts on music, and we hope that people connect to it. But that's really all I have to say about that. Once again, donate to the Ddotpodcast at gmail.com. That's Ddotpodcast at gmail.com. I'm enjoying having these conversations, these longer conversations with you. And, as I said, when I get my my regular computer up and going, you will get those videos, which should just be in a couple of days. It's just, I'm not a very tech savvy person. I'm not. I don't claim to be. In fact, I was lucky because just the other day, and I'll tell you a story. Just the other day, I went to Guitar Center because I wanted to look into getting a XLR to USB connection. And for those of you who don't understand what that is, anybody who records, most people who record, they normally record on with an XLR condenser microphone. I don't know if I'm using the jargon correctly. And these are microphones that are very high powered, very good quality. It's what you find in studios, except you'll find better equipment in those studios. But I have a condenser microphone, which I connect to a preamplifier, and that's what powers my microphone. Now, I found a device that's called an icicle. And an icicle is great because it's just like this. It's about the size of a toothpaste, of a toothpaste container, and it's very light. So what I do is I connect it to my microphone and then connect the USB to my laptop. So now I'm able to record on my laptop, and I don't need a preamplifier, which is great because you don't have all the wiring. And a really big thing, because whenever you get these preamplifiers, whenever you get any of these audio devices, you have to install drivers. So you can't be very mobile because you either have to download the drivers online or you have to have the CDs with you to install them in the new laptop or desktop that you're using. But now, fortunately, I'm able to use my condenser microphone and not get some shitty USB. I hate USB microphones. USB microphones are terrible. They're the worst thing that's ever happened to mankind. And you can tell USB microphones I said that. But like I said, I'm not a very tech savvy person, so I get lax when it comes to equipment. And if I'm able to perform the tasks that I'm able to perform, if I'm able to record, if I'm able to edit stuff, then I ain't gonna fix this shit, because it ain't broke until now. So I have to do something. I also, I want to make this point too. Obviously you guys know that Snapchat is pretty dead. Snapchat is dead for several reasons. Obviously, you had that Rihanna situation. Would you slap Rihanna or would you punch Chris Brown? Whatever stupid shit that they came up with. But it's really dead because of, they changed their whole format, And I post my videos on Snapchat, hoping that it can be a springboard to YouTube, but I'm not really going to do that anymore. And I used to be on Snapchat on camera, but I don't, that's it. I'm lost in Snapchat. You guys aren't going to look for my videos when it's drowned, in between CNN's feed and Kevin Hart and DJ Khaled has suffered the most from this. DJ Khaled is the biggest loser in the failure of Snapchat. Yes, it started when Instagram decided to take the video stories, and I'm not sure how applications work. I don't know how patents work as far as applications. I don't know if Snapchat failed to get a patent for being an app where you can record videos in succession within a story. I'm not sure if that's something that they could have locked down, but goddamn it, if they could have, they should have, because that was the very first step into the demise of Snapchat, was the fact that Instagram was able to take that, and basically nobody found any reason to be on Snapchat. It was just like, well, our videos perish, and okay, so we'll do that over on Instagram. At least you can look at pictures, and I think there's a lot of value in people seeing how many people follow you. I think there's a difference on Snapchat when you can't see the numbers, you can't see how many eyes there are on it. There's a component that's taken away from that, and that's the component of conformity. There's the component of, well, I'm not really sure if this is a quality piece of content. I don't know how many people are watching it. There's levels to all this stuff. There's levels to, people that consume content. Some people don't care about that, but seeing the number gives it a lot of validity, gives it a lot of truth. And if you can't see the numbers on someone's feed, then I think that changes something, but they weren't able to take care of that. So that was the very first step that ruined them. And now you have this feed that they do where, you go to the people that you follow, and now you can't find anybody. You're only able to find people if you can see them in your messages, and then you see that they have a brand new story. But DJ Khaled is a person that suffered most from this, because he was a meme. He was a meme, and he was becoming so popular because of Snapchat. And now I just don't see how Khaled is going to be able to get back to that. I don't know. I mean, of course he would try to get back to that point where he was the biggest, most mentioned name in rap, about a year ago. But it's over now. The hilarity with the sayings and the phrases, and, some people can't handle success. I can. We lose all that, which was all great. I covered some of the things that Khaled had to say, and I enjoyed the things that Khaled had to say. But that's all over now. Let's see what happens moving forward. I can't even see the time that I'm up to here, but I'm pretty sure I've gone longer than half an hour. Thank you guys for listening to the Ddotpodcast, and I know I'm jumping from topic to topic, but I hope you can at least appreciate that I gave you about 2.5 videos within this video. No, you don't have any visual things to see there, and not that you guys listen to my content because you like seeing visuals. I think you just want to hear an opinion on something. So at least I hope you can appreciate that you sort of are getting more content within this podcast, and you're still going to get the content that you were always going to get. But this is the Ddotpodcast. Thank you for listening. As always, you can donate to Ddotpodcast@gmail.com. That's Ddotpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.